Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca, and in this video I'll be critiquing my old art. This is kind of a long-running series on my channel, and it's been a while since the last installment, so I figured it was time to make another. Plus, I needed an easier video to make this week. For these art pieces, we have ones from when I first started drawing to ones that are maybe just a handful of years old. I kind of just went through a lot of my old art and tried to find ones that I hadn't covered before, but some of them have been seen in like the Rapid Roast segments or in that one April Fool's video I did. So let's not waste any time and jump into it. As I was looking through old art, I noticed I went through a phase of drawing faces in profile very flat. Now I know we can't see the whole face in this picture, but the main area I do have problems with when I look at my old profile view drawings is the eye area and the bridge of the nose. To start, the eye is way too close to the edge of the face, so I'm going to select the eye and move it back a bit. Also, when I'm doing this, I'm reworking a copy that is on top of the original. That's why you can see some of the original shining through when I move things around. I simply paint over the areas to clean it up. Next, I want to change the nose. I have the bridge of the nose start very low. It's all the way below the eye. When I draw a nose bridge now, I aim to have it start around the center point of the eye. I also extend the shape of the nose out much more than I used to. I feel like younger me was trying to mimic the stylization of anime profile views, but I just wasn't really succeeding at doing so. They often do have a more kind of flat look, but not this kind of flat. Also, because of the way the lighting is hitting the nose, I decided to add some lighting hitting the cheek, and this also helps add a bit of form to the face and help it look less flat. And so here's before and after. Also, I forgot to mention that in these videos, I like to kind of focus on one topic per picture. I don't critique everything that I feel like could be fixed. So yeah, let's keep moving. We can see that younger me was trying to practice one-point perspective. Overall, it's not horrible. I do have a lot of the lines going back towards the perspective point. But I wanted to talk about how important line weight can be when conveying perspective. If we look at the sidewalk, we see that the lines I used always stay the same thickness, and this makes things look really off. If I were to draw the sidewalk now, I would have my lines be thicker towards the camera, and as the lines move out into the distance, they get thinner and thinner. I also have the lines for the sidewalk get closer together as they recede, and also start to have the lines break up a bit. As details get further away, we see them less clearly, and eventually I just won't draw any lines for the sidewalk. Lastly, instead of leaving where all the lines come together in place, I will fade out the lines. This further helps give the feeling of depth. So yeah, that's how I would draw the sidewalk now. This new way better conveys the feeling of distance, I feel like. I actually remember working very hard on this picture, and it was very challenging for me. So good job, younger me, for challenging yourself. But let's talk about some of the things that can be improved upon. Firstly, the hair feels very stiff. The back is kind of moving, but it doesn't feel like it matches the rest of the movement. Also, her bangs feel stuck in place. Next, I totally posed the arm like this because I did not want to draw the other hand. I spent ages drawing this hand, and I did not feel like repeating that process. So we ended up with this very awkward arm placement that really throws off the movement of the piece. Thirdly, the skirt is moving in the wrong direction. It's flowing this way when it should be flowing this way. One positive that I do want to point out is the tilt of the body. Sometimes beginners will draw the torso in a more vertical position, but when drawing a running pose, having the torso tilted is important. However, I suppose I do see it drawn more vertically if you're going for more of an awkward or funny running pose. But if that's not what you're going for, it should be tilted. So real quick, I want to compare this older picture with a newer running pose I drew for this animation I made of Raylan. First is the position of the leg. In this first one, it almost feels like the leg is moving back down instead of being at its peak height, because I didn't exaggerate the movement enough. Secondly is, of course, this arm. By having it placed like this, we lose the feeling of urgency. The third thing is really important to keep in mind, and it's that the torso twists a bit when running. In this case, the center line is twisting towards us in the new drawing. And lastly is the hair. For Raylan's hair, it feels like it's matching the amount of movement that the body is doing. They feel like they're equal, compared to one feeling like it's moving really fast and like the other one isn't really moving. Also, I'm not trying to say that this new drawing is a perfectly drawn running pose in every way. No, there's definitely still things that could be improved upon, but I thought it'd be a good point of reference to see how differently I draw the same poses. For this picture, the main purpose was to practice drawing curly hair. As you can see, I kind of just draw the hair with squiggly lines that go back and forth. The hair doesn't really look like it's curling. So let's try to redraw this hairstyle and talk about how I would draw it now. To start, we have the front part of the hair. The hair part is around this point, so I'll have the hair flow back to here. I said that I used to draw curly hair with just squiggly lines that go back and forth. And while I still kind of do the same thing, just a little bit different, I draw a line that goes back and forth. Then I draw another line that mimics that same movement. And this is the part that differs from how I used to draw curly hair. To make the hair look like it's curling around itself, I draw lines within the squiggly lines, kind of like this. Now, I wish I could tell you the exact science for placing these inside lines, but I kind of just vibe it, I guess. However, as I'm watching the footage back, I am noticing that I tend to place the inside lines kind of wherever the lines go from bumping out or in. For the curls right here, they are kind of wrapping around the head, and I feel like they are being pulled around the head, so I only draw the wavy shape without any inside twists. Since I feel like the hair is being pulled on, this is making it so it won't really wrap around itself, but it still kind of has that wavy texture. In the original picture, I didn't add much texture or shape to the hair that's being pulled into the ponytail, and I could technically still draw it in this way, but I'm going to draw the hair being pulled a bit more loosely into the ponytail, so that way it still kind of has some of that curly shape. Lastly is the ponytail. I'm going to have one small strand coming off the top, and then we have the rest of the hair. I mostly focused on one larger curl that we can fully see, and the rest are kind of just roughed in curls that I'm kind of suggesting the shape of. A big thing I try to keep in mind when drawing hairstyles like this one is to not be afraid of exaggerating how much the lines move back and forth. By exaggerating this motion, it helps the hair feel more lively and less stiff. So yeah, that's how I would draw this hairstyle now. Sorry again I couldn't give an exact explanation for the curls, but I hope this still helps in a way. I have learned a lot about drawing over the years, and a lot of what I have learned has come from online resources. And an online resource that has really helped me out over the years is Skillshare, the sponsors of this video. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives. They have thousands of creative classes in countless categories ranging from beginner to advanced. Members can go from dabbler to pro in a matter of hours. These categories include illustration, graphic design, animation, 3D modeling, writing, and so many more. Recently, I was learning how to make a logo for my channel. Thankfully, Skillshare has a bunch of helpful classes like this one that I found. Logo Design, How to Create a Unique and Memorable Wordmark by Khadija El-Sharari. Khadija is a freelance graphic designer specialized in branding and packaging, and she'll take you through her entire process on how she designs and crafts wordmark logos. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So start learning today, and thank you so much again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. So for this drawing, I wanted to talk a bit about how I could have made the background a bit more interesting, because right now it's just a bunch of orange and a tree trunk. So to start, I would add some bushes. I'm using a brush that makes a kind of bumpy texture. There are many different ways you can go about stylizing bushes. The biggest factor is using different greens to add depth to the bush. I kind of just roughly add in darker and lighter greens until the bush starts to feel like it has some kind of shape to it. For my usual illustrations, I would go into more detail, but for this, I'm just doing it really quickly and roughly to get the idea across. Next, I want to add in some more trees behind the bushes. I layer the trees so that ones closer to us are larger and darker, and they'll get smaller and lighter as they go into the background. In my usual illustrations, I would add even more layers of trees, but once again, this is just a quick demonstration. I have the one layer of trees that's a bit closer and a second layer that's a bit further away, and I kind of add leaves to those since we can see the tops of them a little bit more. Lastly, to make the trees call less attention, I will blur them out. The further away they are, the more blur I will add. Oh, and I also added another layer of bushes, just to kind of fill things in a little bit more. So yeah, that's how I would go about making the background a little bit more interesting. This is actually an unfinished piece. My plan was to draw a very detailed library scene, but it just felt too overwhelming, so I gave up on it. Plus, I remember not being very happy with how I drew the character and her body type. I was trying to draw a character with a fuller figure, but I didn't really know how to do so. So let's go over some of the things I could have done better. But before we go into that, I want to clarify that different bodies hold weight in different ways. I'm going to be speaking in mostly generalizations, and I know that what I say does not apply to everyone. Bodies come in all shapes and sizes, and I'm only going to be focusing on one type of body shape. So the first thing I want to talk about is the character's head shape. Yes, I did draw it rounder than I usually would, but a lot of times when drawing a character that has more weight on them, we need to not make the face only rounder, but also longer. The reason for this is that when weight is added to the face, it can give it an appearance of being longer, since the weight is being added on top of the base shape of the face. Also, because of this, the neck will look shorter. It will also have some weight added to it, so that will make it look a bit wider. Next, I want to talk about the limbs. I drew the limbs how I usually would. I only added weight to the torso area for the character, and some people do hold weight like this. They don't carry the weight in their limbs, but carry a lot of it in the torso. That being said, I know that's not what I was trying to go for. I was trying to draw a character that had an overall fuller figure. So for the arms, I should have added more width to the upper arm. When I've done studies of different body types, I noticed that a lot of times the lower arms do hold weight, but the upper arms kind of seem to hold more weight. Also, a lot of times the wrist areas and areas around the joints will still get fairly narrow. The same thing can be applied to the legs. A lot of times they still get more narrow by the knees and by the ankles. So to better demonstrate my points, I'm going to quickly redraw the pose to show you how I would go about drawing it now. Something I didn't mention before is that a lot of times when I'm drawing characters with fuller figures, I won't fully connect the line of the jaw or chin. I find this better conveys the shape of the face and what I'm going for. It is very interesting drawing this right beside the old one. I feel like a lot of things are very different, including little details like how I draw the nose or how I style the hair and the overall proportions of the face. For the body, I am trying to keep similar proportions to the original, like keeping the character the same height. I am trying to add some more movement to the pose by drawing the shoulders and hips at different angles. This will help the pose look less stiff. In the old one, I didn't really give much angle differences between the shoulders and hips, so it feels a little bit more on the stiff side. Because I am drawing the torso in this way, I do need to adjust the legs a bit in their position. To have the left side of the torso be pinching in, I need to move the leg on the left forward. Previously, I had the leg on the right stepping forward, but drawing it in this way felt more natural and fluid. Like I mentioned before, I make sure to taper in the legs around the knees and ankles. In some of my studies, I noticed that sometimes it looks like the weight is sitting almost on top of the knee, so I tried to draw it in this way a little bit. Next is the arms. Also, the character's left arm was posed in this way because she was supposed to be holding a book, but for some reason I never ended up drawing the book. Right here, I am noting on how gravity can change the shape of how things look. Like in this case, the lower arm appears more round along the bottom because gravity is pulling the weight down. This is all done very roughly and loosely, but I hope it still helps get the point across. Oh, also I did shift the positions of the arms a bit to make them feel a little bit more natural to me. The arm placement felt kind of awkward in the first one. So here is the old one next to the new one. And that's how I would go about drawing this pose now. Hopefully this information was a bit helpful. For these next two, we are going to be revisiting the days of when I would try to mimic the look of printed Japanese manga. First, we have the infamous pretty boy that made an appearance in one of my rapid roasts. I remember telling my mom when I drew this that you need a male character that draws in the female readers. Does this draw you in? My husband still quotes that, by the way. Anyways, I want to talk about the hair. I wanted to ink it in a way that looked very detailed, but I was also a noob and very lazy. So I would just go in with a white pen and scribble all over the hair, and it looks pretty bad. So let's go over it and try a different method. A way I could have made the hair look shiny is by drawing tapering lines that follow the flow of the hair. This does take a bit more time, but definitely looks better than what I did before. The biggest thing with this is kind of varying the lines and making them follow the hair's direction. Now, to be honest, this does look okay, but I actually prefer the second method more. The second method is closer to a more traditional way of inking. Instead of going over black with white, I'm going in with black and leaving white areas for the shiny part. I always found this way to be the most time consuming, but it also ends up looking the best for me. I remember one time I was reading a shoujo manga, and in one of the little side blurbs, the mangaka was talking about how much they hated inking the male lead's hair because he had black hair and it would take so long, but it always looked so shiny and very good. So yeah, those are some of the ways I would have made the hair look shiny instead of doing this. Lastly, I wanted to talk about something that annoys me in my one-shot White Day. This is a short story I made after I Want to Be a Magical Girl, and I think it's still on the channel somewhere. Anyways, something that annoys me is some of the ways I handled the lettering. I feel like lettering and word balloons can sometimes be a second thought for artists when making comics, when really lettering and word balloons are almost a form of art all on their own, and bad word balloon placement and letter work can kind of kill a comic. Firstly, for some of my word balloons, I allowed the letters to get way too close to the edges of the balloon. A good rule of thumb I saw is to have there be at least a letter between the dialogue and the line of the word balloon, kind of like this. Obviously, you don't have to always measure in this way, but it's a good thing to keep in mind. The second thing I want to talk about is the layout of the words. For some reason when I was younger, I always felt like it was better to have all of the words on the same line. I would make my word balloons very long horizontally and have there be really long sentences. Now, of course, you can do this if that's what you need to fit the space, but a lot of times when I would do this, it just felt really awkward. Also, when laying out the words, try to make the transition between the lines as smooth as you can. Have your words make shapes kind of like this, and avoid shapes that go in and out a lot. These will be easier for your viewers to read, whereas this will probably feel more awkward to read. So that is all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and that it was helpful in some way. It's always interesting to take a look back at my old work. Before we end, I want to thank my super awesome YouTube members and Patreon patrons for their support. It means so much to me. And thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!